To do at the start as normal. May I remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function located at the bottom left hand side of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly. When subsequently invited to address by myself, then please press your activation button at the bottom centre of your screen if you're remote, or the central button on the on your mic. Please be patient and aware there will be a small time lag, but you do not need to press the button again. The response of the system is not instant. If the button or the desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, then please could you turn your camera on to indicate that you want to speak, or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on. I recognise that Councillor Cave is having a problem with her camera for information. To ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring it to the attention of myself and or the Democratic Service Officer as soon as possible. Once you've participated, please remember to turn off your activation button so as not to delay other participants from coming onto screen, and to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in a virtual waiting room until such time as the interested item is concluded. Please do not close your browser window whilst in the waiting room, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person, they'll be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interested item and will be invited back into the room as appropriate. If an electronic vote is called during the course of the meeting, then advice on how to participate will be given accordingly to committee members with voting rights at that time. If the Welsh language is spoken during the meeting, then a simultaneous translation. I don't think that applies today, does it? Have we got the?
He's en route.
The translator is en route. Meeting participants in council chamber, a translation receiver and headset is available at each seat for your use at the appropriate time. For remote meeting participants, a language selection is available under the audio settings tab on the left hand side of your screen for you to use at the appropriate time. The translation will also be audible on the live stream for the meeting for any persons who are observing only. We also have a number of registered speakers this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'll call you into the meeting at the appropriate time, and allocated speaking times will be strictly adhered to. As this is a reconvened meeting, I have another thing to read out. As all members and those present at the planning meeting on the 22nd of February 2024 will be aware, I took the decision to adjourn that meeting due to significant technical difficulties with the virtual meeting system, which came to light during the second matter under item 9 on the agenda, application 2020/01170/out, land at Upper Cosmiston Farm, Lavenot Road, Penarth. The technical difficulties were such that a significant proportion of the members of the planning committee attending the meeting remotely were not able to see, hear or participate in aspects of the debate on the matter. As those members were not party to the full debate through no fault of their own, they would not have been able to participate in any vote on that matter on that day. Therefore, following consultation with the legal and democratic services, the decision has been taken that we will restart the land at Upper Cosmiston Farm matter from the beginning. All public speakers and local members will be permitted to speak to the committee again, in order that all contributors are provided with the opportunity to put their views forward and to ensure that the whole item and all debate on this item takes place today, in order that a decision can be made which is not to the detriment of any party. Due to the passage of time between the adjournment and the reconvening of this meeting, we will start the meeting by taking apologies for absence, if any, and any declarations of interest from members in respect of those items to be heard today. So, Mark, any apologies for absence?
I've not had anything formally through, Chair. I think we're pretty much full complement for committee today.
Thank you very much. So we come to apologies for absence. Councillor Champion, you have your hand up.
Chair, you'll remember that I give my apologies for the February meeting, so I wasn't a part of that at all. So when the minutes do come out, and part of the minutes of that did take place and be minuted, I wasn't in the meeting at that point.
I understand. Yeah, I think the minutes for the first part are already available, but you will be recorded as being present and so forth at this meeting. It's not a problem. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, good afternoon. Yeah. So we adjourn to resume, but we're not resuming. We are starting the item again from.
Councillor Perry, we're having a problem with your audio. You're buffering.
Is correct. Still had quorum at the last meeting. If that happened in a town or community council meeting, I can see myself buffering now. That's quite weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. Can you hear me now, or shall I just come out and come here?
No, that's better now for some reason.
I'm just going to come out and I'll.
Whatever. But while we're waiting, Councillor Cave, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I've got both my audio and my visual went, and I've picked them up again and hope you can hear me.
We can see you as well.
Lovely.
Although you are somewhat pixelated.
Well, I'm afraid I can't help that. I'm sure that's down to some technical reason. Can I just confirm that there have been minutes already made of the meeting that was adjourned, and that we haven't had those minutes brought to this committee?
No, they won't be brought to this committee. They'll be brought to the next committee.
But surely, if it's an adjourned meeting,
yes, because it's an adjourned meeting, it's unlikely that you're going to get the minutes of the same meeting brought to the same meeting.
I'm very confused by what you've just said there. And the other thing that I'd like to point out, I have seen these minutes, although the rest of the members of this planning committee might not have seen them. And what I was really concerned about is that those minutes make no reference to the fact that we're in the middle of an application. And so the application, the points that were made at that meeting are not on those minutes.
Councillor Cave, as I've just explained, the minutes, the item that was adjourned that we adjourned in the middle of is going to be restarted from the beginning, so that item and the discussion that happened then can be repeated now. So anything that was said then can be said now.
But I don't, sorry, point of order, Chair, I don't think that can be the case, because is it not the case that some people that spoke at that meeting are now not here to speak?
No, that's not the case. And in fact, there are more people at this meeting than were at the previous meeting, but and therefore they did not hear that discussion. And in order to be full part of this meeting, they need to hear the discussion, which is why we're restarting from the beginning of that item.
I am very confused now, Chair, because you were quite clear at the end of the meeting on the 22nd of February that you were adjourning the meeting and the meeting would be restarted in a week or two. I know it's taken you some time to get back, but what I'm concerned about is that there are people now at the meeting today that didn't hear that meeting on the 22nd, and that there are people that are turned up on the 22nd and spoke, and they are now not available to speak.
Councillor Cave, let me ask our legal advisor, James, can you come in and explain this to Councillor Cave so that she can understand?
And the rest of the committee, I don't think it's just me that doesn't understand.
I don't think, looking around the room, I don't think anybody in the room is having problems with this. James.
Hi, Jay. Yeah. So as you set out in the statement at the beginning, I think the issue that we had was that at the previous meeting, there were so many technical difficulties with people being taken out of the meeting, not being able to hear parts or all, or being able to contribute, that it would be difficult to understand who was able to vote on the matter due to not being able to have heard all the debate. Because the technical issues with the system have taken longer to resolve than we expected, and there's been a full month between the original meeting and this reconvening, the decision was taken that it would be in the best interests of the good decision making in respect of this matter to start afresh from the start, give everybody who had the opportunity to speak at the beginning on this matter in the original meeting the chance to restate their position, so that all the debate is contained within this meeting, so that the decision making process is much clearer.
Thank you, James.
Sorry, Chair. Can I this is a very important point here. I don't think everybody that was at the meeting that spoke. So those representatives from outside bodies that spoke, I don't believe they are here to reaffirm their point that they made. And haven't we already put? We've already published the live recording of the adjourned meeting. And
Councillor Cave, we've dealt with this. The meeting was the item that we were in the middle of when it was adjourned. We weren't sure who were able to participate and had fully participated. Therefore, for the sake of democratic process, we are restarting the meeting. The fact is, the people who wanted to speak at the last meeting have all been given the opportunity to come and speak at this meeting. If they've chosen not to, that's their choice. Moving on. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up again. What did you want to say?
Yeah, I do. I just want to confirm that the last meeting we did maintain quorum. If we maintain quorum, what's the point of having quorum if we, at the will of the chair, can...
Councillor Perry, we weren't sure that we were fully quorate all through that meeting, and certainly we weren't sure about the people who were in the meeting, who were part of the quorum, were able to see and hear all of the debate. Therefore, it is only right that we restart. Thank you. Councillor Marnie, you had your hand up.
I realise I'm not on the committee, but I'm a bit baffled by all this. I appreciate the support of people, but surely the whole point is that the people who were jutting in and out and being lost need to hear exactly what's said.
Absolutely,
again, that's the whole point. I'd have thought. I'm
Absolutely.
a bit baffled by it. Well, what can I say?
Absolutely, it's what I've just said, and I agree with you. A rare occurrence.
But then if you miss part of the meeting, you lose your vote. That's the unfortunate thing. And we maintain quorum and we maintain the integrity of the committee.
I propose to Councillor Perry. I propose we move on. This has been discussed, and it has been fully explained by our legal officer. Moving on, we come to declarations of interest, if any. My declaration of interest from the last meeting stands again for this. Councillor Johnson, I'll go through all of it.
Yes, similarly, I have previously made comments with regards to the two items on Barry Docks. However, I'll be looking at this with a fresh pair of eyes tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely the same, Chairman, including I was a member of the Planning Committee in 2015 on the two items with the incinerator. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen?
Same declaration. I was a member of Barry Town Council Planning also and commented on this item and also in the last committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, it's same as before concerning the incinerator site. Yes, correct.
Thank you very much. Sandra?
Yes, same declaration as last time, where I was on the planning committee for Barry Town Council and has previously spoken and voted on this, and I believe I've actually spoken about this item for the Barry biomass, the 2 items there, but I'll be looking at this with a fresh pair of eyes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drake?
Yes, I too want to declare exactly the same due to my previous objections and votes against this application, which is the ones on the biomass plant, but we'll review these items objectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Chair. Just a similar previous meeting, made declaration regarding my attendance at previous planning regarding the biomass plant, and clearly I was at last meeting as well. So,
thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cave? Councillor Cave?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I declare on those 2 items, as my colleagues have gone before me, on the Barry biomass. But I find myself in a very difficult predicament in terms of our first application, which we adjourned, because I have already made comments on this application and they have already been published on the Vale of Glamorgan website and on YouTube. And I find myself in a position now where I have to remain silent for this application.
Okay. Noted. Councillor Perry?
I think Councillor Cave got in there just before me, because obviously I've been recorded speaking and asking questions about a planning application we're about to go to again. So I guess I have to declare that I have spoken at apparently this meeting on an item that we're resuming. And resumption for me means you continue from where you left off.
You don't need to declare on that. You need to declare on previous meetings and previous utterances that you may have made outside this
meeting, a previous meeting, or the same meeting. It's all very confusing.
It's effectively the same. It's effectively a continuation of the same meeting.
Moving on, Chair.
Yeah, moving on. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, come on.
Declaring the same interest as at the last meeting where we spoke about this upon our town council.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ernest.
Yes, Chairman. I think that I was present at a previous meeting when the biomass application was discussed, but if I recall rightly, it was deferred because of Welsh Government intervention. So I didn't vote on it to the best of my knowledge. But if so, I declare accordingly.
Thank you very much. Moving on. We come to the planning applications. And the first one on this list is the land at Upper Cosmiston Farm. There are late reps on a number of the items on the agenda, which I'm sure you've all received, including this one. And we have speakers on this. Is Max with us?
Speakers won't speak.
Councillor Wallace? Is Max Wallace with us? Right. Mr. Wallace won't be speaking. What he said before still stands, and he does not wish to add anything. In that case, Councillor Marnie, you're the next on my list.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start now.
You get 5 minutes.
Oh. Sorry.
No, apologies. Just to make, for your reassurance, Councillor, because of the change to the Constitution now, you'll have 5 minutes.
Yes.
That's correct, isn't it?
So, apologies, Chair. Just to check, usually we do the introduction report. I know it's readjourned.
I apologise, yes.
But it might be worth still going through it again because it is readjourned.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, I'm so eager to get on. I apologise, Councillor Marnie. Rob Lancashire, can you please represent the report?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I think Liam's going to be sharing some slides. There we go. So Liam, okay, so this is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for access, the development of the site for up to 576 dwellings, a primary school, community space and public open space. The application is supported by an environmental statement. The site comprises of approximately 25 hectares of land at the southern edge of Penarth within the Sully ward. To the opposite side of a road, to the west is Cosmiston Country Park with established residential development to the north. The majority of the site has recently been in agricultural equestrian use and comprises 7 field parcels. The site includes a section of disused railway line. If we go to the next slide, please, as can be seen on the left-hand side here. Part of the now dormant Lavernock Quarry, a former landfill site known as Cosmiston Number 1 Old Tip, and a number of access tracks and pockets and corridors of woodland and vegetation. Next slide, please, Liam. The land has been allocated within the local development plan for 576 dwellings, as identified within policy MG2 housing allocations of the LDP, with the area edged yellow on the slide before you. To this end, the principle for the quantum of development proposed to this location has already been subject of significant rigour through the LDP process. 1 hectare of the site is allocated to provide a new primary and nursery school, 1 hectare for designated public open space, and an additional 0.1 to 0.2 hectares for the provision of a new community facility, in accordance with policies MG6, MG28 and MG7. Sorry, Liam, can you just go back 1 slide, please, if you can? The application site includes land outside of the allocation for residential development, inclusive of the upper Cosmiston farmhouse, shown to the bottom left of the screen there, and also land more centrally, and both of these elements are within land designated within the South Penarth to Sully Green Wedge, and land designated as a mineral safeguarding zone for sand and gravel and limestone. Since the submission of the application, the original house at Lower Cosmiston Farm has also been Grade 2 listed by CADU. Next slide, please, Liam. As noted, the application has been submitted in outline with proposals indicating the site being split into 4 distinct areas of residential development, with a design code providing a basis for any subsequent reserved matters submissions. Generally, the proposals would comprise of 2 to 3 story development, albeit the scale parameters proposed would allow for a taller landmark 4 to 5 story development adjacent to the area of public open space to the east, and shown in dark purple on that plan before you. Principal areas of open space are shown to the west, adjacent to Lavernock Road, centrally to the southern edge, and the railway line running through the middle of the site, and to the east, providing a buffer to the cliff edge and an allowance for realignment of the Wales coastal path. The submissions also indicate that the historic farmhead would be utilised for community, educational or commercial purposes, with the proposed school site being situated adjacent to this to the southwest of the site. Next slide, please, Liam. This has informed the indicative master plan before you that broadly demonstrates that the development of the site could be developed in an appropriate way to facilitate the quantum of development proposed within the submissions and allocated within the LDP, with 4 distinct character areas as shown on the previous slide. This slide also provides useful context for relationship with the existing pattern of development, including the residential elements to the north, and how it's proposed to retain the central railway corridor through the site for active travel and ecological mitigation. Members may recall that permission has recently been granted for a new facility for Uskilla Dairy to the southwest of the site, between the site and Fort Road, with the general position of the building shown on that plan before you. Next slide, please, Liam. The proposals are also supported by an access and movement plan, which seeks to demonstrate how the proposals would facilitate active travel movements across the site in both north to south and east to west directions to tie in with existing infrastructure, inclusive of the proposed national cycle route running along the old railway line and the coastal path to the east of the site. This next slide, please, shows walking distances from the site to nearby amenities and facilities. Next slide, please, Liam. And then this one is a green infrastructure plan, green infrastructure parameter plan, sorry, indicating the retention of significant areas of trees within the confines of the site, particularly the 2 main kind of fingers behind, running to rear of upper Cosmiston Farm, the existing houses there, down towards the bottom of the site and along the old railway line. And generally develops how it is anticipated that mitigation and enhancement could be achieved within the confines of a development. Following lengthy consideration and consultation, the proposals put before the council were considered to comply with the requirements of the LDP allocation and with the planning policy framework. Nevertheless, the proposals are submitted in outline, and as such, detailed matters of design, layout, scale, and landscaping would be subject to further consideration at reserve matter stage. The officer report details how the proposals have been considered in lieu of a number of technical matters, inclusive of ecology, coastal location, and contaminated land. And following extensive negotiation and consultation, associated impacts are now considered to be acceptable, as detailed within the report and subject to the proposed conditions before members today. Members are also advised the applicant has agreed to meet the requirements of the site in terms of section 106 contributions, whilst the application also states the proposal would provide 50% affordable housing, albeit only 40% would be secured through any legal agreement, noting this is what would be required by policy MG4 of the LDP. Noting all of the above, officers recommend the application be approved, and members are advised this would be subject of consideration by Welsh Government if they wish to call in the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Right, now we come to speakers, and Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you very much. Here we go again. Okay, I'll start off with the obvious to every one of these sites in this area and other areas, I would suspect. The lack of social infrastructure that you're going to dump possibly 600 houses on with the residents of those houses. Doctors, dentists, secondary school spaces. There are none. Every single facility is well overflowing. We know that. The councillors on this committee will be the same ones whining after he's fielding stuff from their residents and their own observations that there are no extra doctors, there are no extra dentists. They're chock-a-block and full now. We then go on to transport and the road infrastructure. Well, what road infrastructure? There's one road, Lavernock Road, falling to pieces as all the others in the county are as well. We know full well that the road just can't take any more traffic. Anybody who's tried travelling through Barry over the last 6 weeks will know even here's chock-a-block, and that travels all the way down to Penarth, of course. We've heard stuff in the report, active travel. I always burst out laughing when I hear this. It's just local authority, national authority speak. The active travel plan points out that 72% of the houses will be sending cars out every morning to work, but the active travel plan will reduce that to 62% in just 5 years. Well, firstly, that's a guess. Secondly, 62% is horrendous. They go on about sustainable transport and 106 money supporting bus routes and that. Well, surely that's the exact opposite of sustainable. If you're subsidising thing and then after a couple of years the money's gone, so the routes go, that's fairly obvious. We go for the hypocrisy of the green campaign, you know, forcing farmers to plant literally 50 acres in one case of one of my friends on his farm of trees, yet their own land they're building over. Hypocrisy on an incredible scale. We know from the reports done and submitted in here, there's 6 out of the 17 bat species in Britain represented on this site. Well, let's not bother about them. We've got a dormice bridge, whatever that is, presumably taking dormice who've been trained from one end of it to the other to their nests, which are now will be concreted over. Reptiles are to be discouraged from entering the building site, was one line I picked up. Well, I mean, again, absolute and utter nonsense. Who comes up with this rubbish? We have bird numbers on site that's described numbers of a county importance. Let's just ignore that as well, of course. We then go on to the heritage report submitted by the developers. As I've mentioned before, 2 local archaeologists, the Lambert brothers, knew that this was faulty, went straight to Cadw and accompanied on 2 different trips over here by Cadw, got protected status on one of the farmhouses there. How can you take any of the reports submitted by the developers seriously after that? It's just ridiculous. We go on to the flood zone. We know that Lavernock Road is in a flood zone. I was almost ridiculed by one of the officers in the previous adjourned meeting because I'd mentioned the class 2 flood zone along Hayes Road, which a Welsh Assembly planning inspector had dismissed an application there because it's actually a flood zone B. Well, let me tell you what a flood zone B says. It says mid to high risk of flooding. Isn't that significant enough to be picking little holes in when you've got no right to reply to a council planning officer? The water is discharged into the Sully Brook. The Sully Brook, as I mentioned before, I've tramped the Sully Brook with a council officer on an official meeting where he said they're scared stiff of dredging anymore because it'll send unacceptable levels of water down to Sully Moors and could flood the chemical works and businesses. And I don't know how many councillors on this planning committee have trudged along there. Well, I have this week. I counted at least 20 blockages of branches there. It's ridiculous. Welsh Water, we'll cope with the sewage. This would be the Welsh Water concern, which the BBC website says that in 2022 discharged 600,000 hours of sewage through overcapacity, and I can't believe this figure, in 83,000 different incidents. Why would you believe a word that comes out of the mouth of that organisation? It's just staggering. And last, and not least, there is no financial viability report included in these papers. This planning committee came a cropper over the new model farm, was taken to a judicial report, which was then withdrawn because the planning department here backed down and the whole finding was dismissed because there was no financial viability report in these papers. Why has anything changed now? Why are you even considering this application given the lack of that vital document, which can't be made up anyway?
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. That's your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Are there any points of clarification for Councillor Marnie? I see none. Rob, are there any items in Councillor Marnie's submission that you wish to address?
Yeah, I'm happy to, if this is the time, certainly. So in terms of, I mean, I guess in kind of try and touch on as many as I can. So sorry if I do miss any, so just let me know if I do. In terms of the issue about the kind of location of development relative to facilities and what have you, obviously this is an allocated site. This is being considered under the LDP. It's been examined by an inspector as part of that process, and those issues have been considered in a large degree. In terms of healthcare issues, you know, it is acknowledged as a systemic issue running throughout the NHS. You know, there are community facilities within the Barnes and Limestone Square which are shown which could be suitable for such a facility if one was to come forward. However, these are kind of privately run businesses. They would have to identify where they'd want to go. It's not suitable to use Section 106 funding to provide such services. Given that they are generally privately run and funded services, you know, there is opportunity potentially for the health service issues to be catered for, albeit it's outside the remit of this application. Transport, in terms of transport, road infrastructure, active travel plan, this application has been scrutinised significantly by our highway development section, including the transport assessment that's submitted, which has also been reviewed by an independent consultant who's considered that those matters have been adequately addressed, and indeed the conditions attached to the proposed permission, or the proposed conditions, sorry, include a number of off-site improvements to local road infrastructure, including Lavernock Westbourne Road Junction, Lavernock Road and Dinnis Road and Victoria Road Junction, and yeah, potentially. Yeah, so those junctions in particular. In terms of sustainable transport money, the £1.3 million worth of sustainable transport money has been provided, and in addition to bus stop infrastructure on Lavernock Road itself. So we're satisfied that those measures are being put in place. Similarly, the kind of retention of the old railway line and the provision of an active travel route, which has been promoted by Transport for Wales and our active travel team. It would integrate well within there, and it linked to the existing active travel route up to Penarth Town Centre itself. Turning to the ecological issues, again, this has been scrutinised extensively by the county ecologist, Natural Resources Wales, with regard to protected species, including the bat species that Councillor Marnie has identified. The dormice and the reptiles, all of those have been, and necessary mitigation. And there's a wide range of conditions, licenses, manners in which these are being sought to be dealt with. For instance, dormice, there's dormice conservation plan condition required as part of the that would be attached as a condition. Should members be minded to approve the application. Other things, updated surveys to be submitted at each point, to support reserve matters applications that come forward. A landscape ecological management plan, which would then enable suitable mitigation and compensation to be provided. So that's that. In terms of the local archaeologists, again, that report was sent in as a representation as part of this application, discussed with our advisors, Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, who have advised that it doesn't alter their findings in terms that there was a condition for requiring a written scheme of archaeological investigation to be provided, prior to the commencement of any works on the site. And similarly, the issues relating to the farm buildings, they are now shown to be retained and put to a community use, given their Grade 2 listing. So retention of those buildings has been secured as part of the application. In terms of the location within Zone B of the and the points made there, what technical advice note 15, which identifies the various different flood zone states, that flood zone B is generally suitable for most forms of development. Assessments, where required, are unlikely to identify consequences that cannot be overcome or managed to an acceptable level. It is unlikely, therefore, that these would result in refusal of planning consent on the grounds of flooding. So again, this has been considered and scrutinised in association with our drainage section and with Natural Resources Wales, who haven't raised issue with regard to any issues of Lavernock Road falling within flood zone B. In terms of Welsh Water, the comments we have had have identified and that there is suitable capacity in the local sewerage network, subject to hydraulic modelling assessments being undertaken by the applicant and what have you. In the absence of objection from them, and noting that, again, a condition relating to a scheme of foul drainage to be submitted subsequent to any outline consent, it's considered that that matter has been adequately dealt with and considered in conjunction with the relevant statutory consultee. Lastly, I think these are all the points, so apologies for not. In terms of the financial viability, you would usually expect a financial viability report to be put in association with an application where they might be, an applicant may be proposing lesser financial contributions or planning obligations than would be the case required by our adopted policies. In this case, the applicant has agreed to meet the requirements of our policies in full, and in the case of affordable housing, is actually proposing to provide 50% affordable housing through the site, albeit, as I mentioned earlier, given that that exceeds the policy requirement, we can only request the 40% or secure the 40% through the necessary legal agreement. However, it's evident through the submissions to the design code and other design and access statement that it's Welsh Government intention to secure 50% affordable housing through the scheme, and that would be obviously subject to any contracts or anything that goes to future developments of the site. So hopefully that addresses some of those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. In the absence of any other public speakers or external speakers, we'll move on to the debate within the members of the committee. If you could indicate whether you wish to speak, please.
Sorry, public speaker, Barry Davis. Barry Davis, Chair.
Oh, yeah. I apologise. Yeah, we do have another speaker. I forgot. Barry Davis, who wishes to speak for the application. I'm sorry, Barry. The time will start when you start. We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Barry. Still no audio coming through, Mr. Davis. Have you just put in your headphones? Because that might be affecting the audio. There's still no sound coming through. Mr. Davis, can you just try and rejoin again now with and try your sound again, please? Right, I think it might be to do with your headphones, Mr. Davis. Are you able to take them out and just use your audio on your device? If not, you might have to leave and rejoin through the link. Right, my colleague Gareth Davis is just going to call you now, and we'll see if we can troubleshoot that. So bear with us a second.
We'll pause for a minute or so while this is sorted out. Sorry, all.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Your time will start when you start speaking.
Deal, Chair. Sorry about that. This outline application has been long in the making, comprising 2 years of pre-application discussion and then a further 3 years since we submitted the application. In that time, we've undertaken extensive engagement with the community and extensive discussions with the LPA and its consultees to reach this point where the development proposal before you is acceptable to your officers. The site is allocated within the adopted LDP for up to 576 homes and a primary school. The adopted plan has been subject to thorough examination by a planning inspector, and there cannot be any doubt over the principle of this type and quantum of development on this site. In line with the adopted LDP, this outline application proposes 576 homes, including a substantial number of affordable homes. The Penarth, Sully and Landock area has one of the highest levels of affordable housing need in the Vale, with 1,125 households currently on the waiting list in these wards alone. The affordable housing requirement for the area is set at 40%, but Welsh Government's aspiration is that 50% affordable housing should be delivered, and this site will therefore provide up to 288 affordable homes. The development will also provide a £7.8 million Section 106 contribution towards a new primary school on the site, sustainable transport improvements, coastline monitoring and public art. And whilst the total site area is around 25 hectares, the net developable area is less than 16 hectares, as the application includes over 9 hectares of new and retained habitats comprising community gardens, wetlands, orchards and open space,
and proposes 6,000 square metres net increase in new hedgerows. The layout provides pedestrian and cycle routes that link with existing routes, including the extension of National Cycle Route number 88, providing a direct active travel corridor to Penarth Town Centre, supported by a contribution of £1.3 million for sustainable transport provision. A package of off-site highways improvement works have also been agreed with the Highways Authority, including works to the junction of Lavenock Road, Westbourne Road. The Highways Authority confirmed they have no objection to the development. The outline application is supported by a robust design code, providing a framework for future developers to prepare reserve matters applications, including a route to achieve net zero carbon development. In conclusion, following extensive consultation with the local authority and their consultees, an outline plan application is presented to members, which is considered to be acceptable in all regards, and we would therefore respectfully request that the application is approved in line with the Planning Officer's recommendation. Diolch.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Do any members of the committee have any points of clarification they wish to raise with Mr. Davis? Councillor Champion, you have your hand up.
Is the design code available to the committee?
Yes, it is. It's one of the documents that will be approved as part of the outline application, if you're so minded to approve it.
Thank you.
Yeah, those documents are actually in the bundle, or access to them is in the bundle. Any other points of clarification? I see no hands. We move then back to the committee and discussion. Any members of the committee who wish to speak, could you please indicate? Councillor Ernest.
Thank you, Chairman. I was impressed by my colleague, Councillor Marnie, who I do not always agree with, but I think he made some very valid points earlier on in the debate. From my point of view, this scheme sounds absolutely idyllic. Everything is there. The land is not very much has been taken up for development. Everything in the garden is rosy. But I'm going to paint a slightly different picture, as you might expect. The impact on the wider Penarth situation, firstly. Traffic. Yes, as rightly been said, Lavenock Road is a single one-way carriageway, one lane each way, that takes traffic towards Cardiff, Penarth and the east. There is already queuing at busy times along Lavenock Road with the existing traffic coming from Barry and Sully. The impact on Westbourne Road, Lavenock Road, Plymouth Road, the Esplanade, all these routes carry large amounts of traffic through Penarth, not necessarily stopping in Penarth, but travelling through Penarth, all those roads lying in my ward, and with an impact on the residents living in them. The schools in the area, Evenlode schools, Sully schools, are both, to the best of my knowledge, over capacity, or certainly at capacity. So although we hear of a new primary school being built, that would be subject to monies coming forward. And we know that the Vale is in such dire straits for money that the likelihood of monies for a new school will be several years away, if not decades away. Transport. A 30-minute bus service, hardly ideal to serve the additional 1,500 people who will be living on the new estate, together with those already coming from Barry and Sully on the 94 bus. The lack of amenities, Chairman. No amenities for residents, other than walking and cycling, but I don't really call those amenities. And as for the retail offer, there is simply one shop, good shop at that, at the Brockhill Way. This was a reserved site for many, many years, but it's suddenly become a priority site under the revised LDP. But it was never in the forefront originally. It is now. We've had the loss of a working farm and good agricultural land that until virtually months ago, housed either cattle or indeed horses. The impact on the Wales Coastal Path. This is something I particularly feel strongly about, having supported the Wales Coastal Path the 11 years or so in which it's been. There's provision to move the coastal path back from the coast onto a housing estate. Now, how is that an improvement? It isn't. The impact on the Cliff Walk estate and the Lavenock Park estate. This is going to make a major impact on those two areas of Penarth, partly lying in Surrey, I accept, the other part lying within Penarth. Discounted in the report, flooding. Well, we all know that Lavenock Road floods every time there's heavy rain. It happened last month. It'll be happening again over the coming months. Possibly not on the estate itself, but certainly the impact for travellers is there. The loss of amenity space in the countryside, which Penarthians treasure, and by this I mean open space. Of course it's privately owned, but at the moment it's owned by the Welsh Government and it's been reasonably free to roam over the months. I've not much more, Chairman. I'll just say that I think this is a massive overdevelopment by what I call a greedy Welsh Government, who are short of money to spend on unsuitable projects elsewhere in Wales. They're trying to get 50% affordable housing. They've put the site on the market already with agents to see whether they can get enough money coming in to meet that budget. I don't think they will, but I could be wrong. And Chairman, with that, I have to say that I'm totally opposed to this scheme as a matter of principle, despite the apparent benefits that it would be supposed to bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. Any other members of the committee want to raise anything? Yeah. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. There was one issue that I wanted to, was about the route of the coastal path. Is there any change to the coastal path route, having walked it many times through Surrey and Penarth?
Thank you. I'll ask Rob to comment on everything at the end of the debate. Any other members of the committee want to raise anything? So.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, because obviously this is on the local development plan and it describes how, that Penarth, Surrey and Landock are one of the areas that really need sort of housing built to meet the demand that was there. I wondered if, because this is only my second term, when did this actually first go on to the local development plan? Do we have any idea if this has been on the local development plan for a while and whether the officer can answer that? Because it just seems to be that this has gone through all the processes that it needs to be, but it's come towards us for us to consider and to look at, what is the housing need for that area, as well as other mitigations that have actually come before us, and we've had the explanation today. So yes, I just wondered if there was, just out of curiosity, when it did first go on the local development plan. Thank you.
Yeah. Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, for offering the opportunity for me to speak. I speak in favour of the application, and I want to basically, we got a very thorough report from the officers, and I want to refer to certain page numbers as well. So first of all, I want members to have a look on page 11 on this application. And page 11, as you probably realise, looks at the great need for housing within this area. And I want to refer to the table, the Homes for You data, and also the Aspire to Own data. And as you can see there, we have seen a demand for in Penarth area 801 accommodation in terms of social rented, and 231 for low cost ownership in Penarth. And in Surrey, we're talking 121, and Landock 203. In Surrey, it was 141 and 11. As you can see, there's a huge demand for low cost and social housing. And this is why I'm very pleased that this application says there's 50% for social housing and low cost. And really, this is something that very much people in the Penarth area, and I include Landock in Surrey in that as well, very much in need for this. And this is one good reason I support the application. I know that some members have obviously demonstrated some concern about the drainage. But you look at the page 41 of the report, it talks about the sustainable drainage scheme, the SAB. And really, it does adequately look at that. And it does say there is sufficient capacity to cope with drainage. And this is not our office, this is NRW saying it. So I think we need to take notice of natural resources wells when they say this. Someone has also mentioned on about habitats as well. Now, clearly, we have got concerns about habitats, but really we can make sure that we allow, as Rob Lancashire has rightly said, this application, okay, and the applicant as well, has said that really we've got adequate space available for habitats in this area. We will look at it as a mixed development. It's not just housing, as some people would like to give the impression. Indeed, not a lot of site is allocated for open space and for habitats as well. And then if we go on into the contributions to schools on page 51 and 52 and 53, you see there's significant contributions. I mean, if you're looking at the 106, total contribution for nursery and primary school, it's over £3 million. For secondary school on page 53, it's £3.3 million. Now, I would have thought with that kind of sizable sums of money, there should be sufficient money for a new school, nor there should be sufficient maybe increasing capacity at the existing secondary schools within the Penarth area, as well as giving money to Welsh medium education and denominational funding. So these are the reasons why I was supporting it. And the above reason, it's our policy as well. And I think as soon as we go against policy, then we open ourselves up to all sorts of applications, because lots of people say, actually, it doesn't really matter. It's not in the policy. We can withdraw it. So I think we've got to support this. It's in our policy. We're getting quite a lot of 106 money. We really got a real housing crisis, as no doubt all of you, including opposition members, get lots of communications from residents looking for housing. That's why I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Champion.
I understand that this application has been about 5 years in the design process. I'm just wondering why the school is to the very south. It seems a bit odd. And there seems to be a lot of local councillors that know the area quite well are saying it's not an ideal solution for this site. But yes, we need housing. But is it the number of housing we need here, and is it the right place for the housing that is needed? This is the question. Thank you.
Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Buckley, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I had some similar concerns to Councillor Manny and Councillor Ernest. The lack of local infrastructure, the doctors and the dentists and that is dire in Penarth and Surrey. The active travel bit I was concerned about initially, however, dropping to 62% of people using cars, I think is a step in the right direction, which will only improve over time. The flood zone, as a local person, everyone knows that Lavernock Road does flood. However, the SAB approval body and the said stuff which NRW and Welsh Water are happy with has alleviated my fears regarding that. I was very concerned about no financial viability report until the officer pointed out that normally that only comes in when people are trying not to give us the appropriate amount of 106 money. The fact that this developer has given us 50% social housing, which by our figures here equates to nearly 25% of the 1,200 properties that are needed in Penarth and Surrey, I think is brilliant. It's a 25 hectare site. 16 hectares are being developed. Over half of it is being left as green space, which I think is quite an economic. Sorry? Sorry, virtually half of the site, a third of it is half of what is being developed. I do apologise. And I was concerned with regards to the coastal path being affected as well. However, the map and the report states that where it will be drawn back onto the estate, what it will do, people that walk it who are able-bodied, it is a lovely walk, but if you are less able, it's not very accessible for people who are non-ambulant. And I think putting it onto a tarmac thing for at least part of the way will increase the amount of the coastal path that's accessible to non-ambulant people. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Any other members of the committee wish to speak at this point? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Na I roi.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give everyone a moment to put their earphones on. Everyone okay? If I speak in Welsh, can you hear the translator coming through? One or two people having some trouble in the room, so I'm just going to give them a moment. I'm going to continue. Okay, everybody can hear me now in the room. So it's an interesting conversation. I'm not someone who's from the Penarth Sully area. I used the opportunity to visit the site as part of the committee site visit in February. I travelled with Councillor Hodges on the bus from the Barry to demonstrate that it is accessible via public transport. A number of things which have caused me concern, generally speaking, around the plan, but obviously, as Councillor Champion mentioned, this has been through the planning process for a long time, and I think this is a lot of questions. The outline application being responded to through the conditions that we have as part of the application today. I was concerned about erosion near to the coast. I was concerned about the wildlife and flooding. And this all relates to conditions which form part of the application in front of us. If we look at the geography of Penarth, it's clear that there's not much room to build further housing. This was included in the local development plan in 2017, which was passed by the Labour and Conservative members. There are 2 points which cause me concern. If I might say, people concerned about the public transport, I'm not totally clear on that. There's a bus going through twice an hour and another bus going to, so 2 buses going 2 times an hour, and by April there'll be 3 buses every hour. So if there are additional funding for buses, this would increase it further from 3 times an hour. I'm concerned about the over-reliance on cars for the site. If we're talking about 2 cars or 1.9 cars every house, this strikes me as too much and in contradiction of the government policy, especially if we're talking about a lot of public sector housing where we know from work in the Barry and other places that less people have houses than in private housing. And I would just like to raise a question around the S106 funding in terms of the school in two ways. One thing, I think this goes against the Welsh Government policy because it earmarks this school as an English medium school as opposed to a Welsh medium. This goes against the million speakers policy by 2050, and as well, I would like to confirm that we are happy with inflation, which does appear for capital projects, that we are happy that the funding being earmarked as part of the S106 funding, that it will be enough to meet the aim at the end of the project, because by then I'm sure that building costs will probably be higher than they are at present. And we found out about this in Barry, with it being two stream rather than one stream. We needed a lot more funding than what we expected for the building of Ysgol Sant Barrick. So I don't want us to make the same mistake again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. We can't hear you, Councillor Perry.
Oh, there we go. Was that the person who got terrible static through the English channel? Because the sound quality was very, very poor. Just a point of information.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. In fact, yeah, we had some crackling on the headphones in the room as well. But I think we got the gist of what Councillor Johnson had to say. In fact, we got most of it. Are there, Councillor Cowp, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're quite faint.
Okay. Oh, right. I'll see if I can do something with the volume. Yes, I agree. There was static on the English channel, but I could understand everything that Councillor Johnson said. And I want to agree with the comments he's made. And I think an answer about the rising costs of the school and the Welsh language appropriate in that school would be an important question if that could be answered tonight. I know the area very well. Go out in that area a lot, and it's very, very beautiful and pretty. And I can understand that a building housing there would cause concern for people, but the fact of the matter is that we do need housing locally, and we do need social housing, and we have to build somewhere. And I think it is a pleasant sight. And as Councillor Johnson says, there are bus services along that road. I do recognise the concerns about the transport infrastructure and the roads in the entire area here. And going from Sully to Penarth is very busy. There is a bottleneck going through past Landock. It's very difficult to get in and out of Penarth in the morning, as I'm sure any parent delivering a child to school will agree. And I do recognise the situation regarding medical and dental facilities, but it isn't unique to the Vale of Glamorgan, and certainly it isn't unique to Wales. It's endemic across the whole of the country. We presently do have more patients per GP in Wales than would be recognisable in other European countries, but that situation is bigger than us. And I know that the local medical centres and services try their best, to triage patients and to give the best service they can. And from experience, I can only say that when myself or my family have needed medical services, we have been able to access them. And the medical services are there when you need them. I think it's a different situation if you've got long-term medical conditions and long-term appointments. That might be different. It might be more difficult to get an appointment when you want it. You may have to have an appointment that perhaps is at a time that isn't convenient to you. Those services are struggling, but that isn't only our problem. So overall, and looking at the officers' reports on everything seems to have been looked at, and I can't say that I'm not in favour of this application. I don't know if there's any more discussion to take place about it, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Nick Hodges, Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I've heard the debate. Can I move officer's recommendation?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Rob, do you want to come in with any comments on what's been said? Rob Lancashire?
Yeah, I can come in quickly. First of all, just in terms of the agricultural land issue, I know Councillor Ernest raised a couple of points in terms of education. I'll wrap those up at the end, if that's okay. In terms of the grade of agricultural land, it's identified as being grade 3B or worse, which is not protected agricultural land in terms of being the best and most versatile in terms of planning policy Wales. In terms of the coastal path and rerouting it through the site, this was something which, particularly in the early stages of negotiation on the application, was subject to quite significant scrutiny. Our public rates of way officer identified that actually in places the coastal path was, on the existing alignment, is very close to the cliff edge. I think it was about 2 meters and a couple of points. And in essence, they were keen, where possible, to provide a buffer or a option to reroute the site in the future. So hence why that is shown on the indicative master plan. I believe they wanted a buffer of circa 20 meters to allow for the future proofing of the path, rather than the facility being lost and in turn possibly being rerouted through the development instead. If in essence, when the original application came in, there wasn't a coastal kind of public open space area there, or it was much more significantly constrained, and officers were of the mind that this would be a benefit for proposals, that it would future-proof it in that location. In terms of the drainage issues, acknowledge those, as stated within the officer report. The SAB, basically there has been engagement already with the SAB pre-application process by the applicants with regard to that. So in terms of they were satisfied, our drainage section again were satisfied that it wouldn't result in any detriment or significant worsening of that. I believe the kind of flashy nature of flooding on Lavernock Road again would, from their perspective or NRW's perspective, isn't identified as being a restriction on granting planning permission or prohibitive to access egress to the site, like a main flood zone would be, like a C2 flood zone or something like that. In terms of the school site and where that is shown to be located, again, that was subject to negotiation. That we did discuss at one point having the school more centrally located within the site. However, in essence, there are 2 points of access from Lavernock Road. The southernmost is a smaller level of residential development and would prevent any significant conflict between the majority of the housing site and road users in accessing and egressing the site. And this way, it's more a kind of distinct location, but still serviceable, and actually with the retention of the listed buildings, it performs a kind of community education hub along with the Uscala site to the south. In terms of levels of parking, again, the level shown on the parameter plans are, in essence, already below the kind of, the parking standards that we have are maximum parking standards. There is a degree of relaxation that can be had. Obviously, the exact level and nature of parking to serve each and every unit would be subject of further kind of rigor and consideration at the reserve matters stage. So, again, for different types of levels of parking for different types of units would be considered at that point. In terms of the school site, the requirement for English medium was established through consultation with our education section. My understand, just sorry, one more point about Councillor Ernest. He mentioned about the lack of secondary provision. Again, the report details the consideration of that. And again, through a consultation with our education section, it was, agreed that, £3.3 million would be provided towards enhanced secondary school provision. In terms of the contributions, I believe they are index linked. And I know I think our SPG does mention that. Sorry, just bear with, trying to find the correct paragraph. Now I seem to have lost it. Unfortunately, I did have it up in front of me just now. There we go. So yeah, paragraph 7.4 of the planning obligations SPG states all financial contributions are index linked from the date the legal agreement is signed to the date of payment. Yes, so that hopefully that satisfies that question. And in terms of the LDP and the background to that, I believe Ian might be better placed to advise on the exact status of when this site was put in the plan. I know the LDP was adopted in 2017, but he may be able to give you a bit more background in terms of the insertion of this site into that plan.
Thank you, Rob. Ian, do you have any? Can you enlighten us further when this was first put on the LDP?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I can't tell you the exact date, but just a bit of background that might give sort of clarity to its path to the LDP. I wasn't involved at the time, but my understanding is it wasn't originally identified to be in the plan. I think some members may recall through the plan process, some of the sites that were initially programmed to be in the plan sort of fell away. And I think my recollection is as well that the inspector had some concern about the level of contingency in the plan. So my recollection is it was 10%, and members that have been to LDP briefing sessions will have heard us talk about when we sort of structured the housing figures that we're proposing for the new plan using a contingency of 10%. It's not that it has to be 10%, but it depends on the makeup of your sites. Through a plan process, inevitably some sites don't come forward for whatever reason. So that's why Welsh Government will insist on there being a contingency there. If you had your housing supply made up of a couple of huge sites, they may want a bigger contingency, because if one of those falls away, it has a bigger dent. In any case, here, the inspector considered that the contingency that had been allowed for wasn't sufficient, so that resulted in the allocation of this site of this size. So it was kind of later in the plan process that it came in, but it was obviously still subject to all the assessments that all the other sites were in terms of the examination from the inspector, consultation, etc. It was it wasn't a last minute thing, but it certainly wasn't at the very outset. But it has been part of the plan ever since adoption, along with all the other allocations.
Thank you. Right, we have Councillor Ernest. Then I want to move to the vote.
Move to a vote, Chair.
Yes, Chairman, I was going to say, if my memory serves me right, it was 2011 when the site was first identified as a secondary site in the LDP. And I think when the Labour administration took over in 2012, they moved it from a secondary site to a primary site.
Right, thank you very much. Right, a vote has been called for. We'll move to the vote. It has been moved and seconded. Officer's recommendations have been moved to seconded. Could you do that?
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, can we have a recorded vote? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. It normally is. For the voting, it's green, positive for yes for in the room, and you have your own setup if you're voting from your personal devices. Councillor Gilligan, are you still with us? Are you having trouble voting?
Hi, it's Councillor Gilligan here. It's telling me I'm not authorised to vote.
Would you give your vote verbally then, Councillor Gilligan, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, everyone has now voted.
Councillor Perry, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Perry.
Councillor Perry hasn't voted. I don't believe, Chair. He did have his hand up.
Councillor Perry, have you voted?
My hand has been up, and that was before the vote. And just so I will follow Councillor Cave, because at the previous time we heard this,
You're withdrawing. You're withdrawing from the meeting. Thank you. We're in the middle of a vote.
Well,
It's not a time
really
for a quick debate.
meeting. I'm just kind of silently protesting because things were heard by me and others in February that have not been heard today.
Switch them off. In that case, I declare vote closed. Right. It's past 11-4, 12-4, sorry, I apologise. 2 against, that's carried. Thank you all. Moving on. We come to application 2023-00032 of Bleak Full. Again, we have public speakers. Ian Robinson, I think you're presenting this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's right. So there's 2 applications on the agenda this evening relating to this site. I think we're planning to take them in order. They're separate applications. They do combined to one single development, but for process reasons, we'll take them in chronological order. So the first application is 2023-00032/FUL. It relates to land at Barry Biomass Plant on David Davis Road. I'll just flag at the outset for members' information that there were matters arising on the report, with the report in February, and there are some extra ones again today. Those have all been circulated to members. This application, like Cosmeston, is subject to a holding direction from Welsh Government. So in the event that members are minded to approve the application, then it would be referred to Welsh Government to consider whether they want to call it in. If members want to refuse the application, then members are entitled to do so tonight, and it won't go to a call-in. So that call-in consideration only relates to a resolution to approve. And just wanted to flag at the outset as well that officers would propose it in the event that members were minded to resolve to approve. We'd recommend an extra condition relating to implementation of a landscaping scheme. If we get to that point and a wording is needed, then I can go into that then. Right. So just a summary of the application. So this application it's a Section 73A application, which the report explains what that is. It essentially is an application to vary condition 5 of application 2015-00031. That involves varying the plans condition. So that condition 5 of the 2015 consent was the one that listed the approved plans. So as members may be aware, since the grant of the previous planning permission, development commenced on site, and what has been built varies in certain ways from what previously had planning permission. Liam has shown some slides here. That plan there shows obviously the site layout and the kind of the arrangement of the various buildings and plant and machinery. The land there shown in blue is where the second application relates to, just for context. Can we flip on one, Liam? These are the elevations which show the sort of the composition of the buildings and the various plant and machinery. It's kind of these plans kind of probably show best and this is shown in the report, I believe, the distinction between the previously approved development and this. There are it's substantially the same, but elements of extra plant and machinery, racking and silos and hoppers and things like that, an externally mounted conveyor. A quirk, if you like, of the previous approval, the elevations were essentially handed from the layout plans. So that is obviously another issue that these plans seek to rectify. Can you move on? Here you go. So I've just got here just a bit of a timeline for context. So obviously there's a long and complicated planning history to this site. So I don't propose to go through absolutely everything, but if there are any gaps which members want advice or discussion on, then let me know. But just as broad context, originally back in July 2009, Planning Committee of this council refused a 2008 registered planning application for a similar development for reasons relating to noise, traffic, pollution, impact on character of the area. Subsequently, in 2010, Planning Commission was granted at an appeal, and there was an award of costs against the council relating to kind of the level of evidence to support the reasons for refusal. 2015, can I just check members can hear me okay, because my mic is a bit in and out? Okay, fine. 2015, we had a subsequent application, 2015-0031. That's the one which this one seeks to vary. Committee approved that application. That was in outline, except with all matters approved then except for landscaping, and that landscaping was approved in 2016. Next slide, please, Liam. So subsequently in 2016, council received complaints that the development had commenced, and there were some issues relating to noise and dust, etc. So that was investigated by the council's planning enforcement team. Subsequently, it was identified that there were variations between the approved development and what had been constructed. Subsequent correspondence with the developer did not initially result in the submission of an application to regularise that, and consequently officers reported to Planning Committee in September 2021 to seek authorisation to take enforcement action, and that was approved. The principal reason for that was because the council couldn't afford to allow an unregularised development on the ground to become lawful. So the purpose of the enforcement action as set out in that report was to protect the council against that position. Enforcement notice referred to the breach as being operational development comprising the construction of a wood-fired renewable energy plant together with associated structure, and referred to land to the north, and the steps required the removal of the development. Next slide. So in October 2021, the developer appealed the enforcement notice, and there has been an ongoing appeal in relation to that until relatively recently. In January of last year, the developer submitted this application and the next one, number 33, in attempt to regularise what's being built on the ground, essentially to regularise those changes from the previously approved development. There's been a lot of correspondence between the developer and the council and PEDU through the appeal process, and in February of 2023, PEDU wrote to the council to kind of invite comments in respect of how the breach had been structured on the enforcement notice and the steps, in light of evidence that the 2015 consent had been implemented. So having regard to the evidence on the ground, PEDU's apparent view on the matter, we reported back to Planning Committee in April 23 to recommend that we go back to PEDU to accept that the breach should be worded as a failure to comply with condition 5 of the previous consent, rather than it being an entirely unauthorised development in its own right with no reference to an approved or implemented development. Next slide, please, Liam. Subsequently, despite the fact that the council wrote to PEDU to say that we would agree to those changes to the notice, which we didn't believe and continued to believe wouldn't have caused injustice or prejudice to anybody, PEDU were of the view that those changes were too significant for them to modify the notice within the scope of the appeal. So subsequently in August, the notice was quashed. And here we are, well, we're March now, but when this was written, it was February 2024, and applications are being reported to Planning Committee. So In terms of the development, the assessment and kind of what's set out in the report, as I mentioned earlier, this is what we call a Section 73A application. So it's seeking to amend a condition. What the report sets out is that in these circumstances, the assessment doesn't involve a wholesale from the start. Is this development acceptable in principle? It's looking at the changes proposed. So it's in light of an implemented consent. And it's looking at whether the changes to the development and the changes to that condition, and when I say changes condition, I mean proposing to reference the new plans that reflect the development as built, whether those changes to the developments are acceptable or not. So as you can see from the report, officers are of the view, having spent a long time back and forth with the developer, a long time in consultation with consultees and members of the public and interested groups, that the changes are acceptable. They're not considered to be fundamental to the proposal. There are no objections from technical consultees, and consequently the recommendation is for approval. It's obviously noteworthy that the application is accompanied by an environmental impact assessment which has looked at all kind of the relevant impacts associated with the development. I know we have a speaker who I'm sure will go into some detail, but members will see from the matters arising and from the report that there's been a lot of reps received about scope of the environmental statement, level of scrutiny that's received. I've touched on it earlier that what we see as being the relevant consultees to judge these impacts have come back and said that they accept that the development is acceptable, and of course, if permission were granted, it would run alongside a Natural Resources Wales permit for the operation as well. I think I'll draw a line there, Chair, because it's in danger of getting kind of overly complex. But of course, I'm happy to come back on any points, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. We have a public speaker on this. Mr. Davis, you've been told the rules. And Mr. Clark, I apologise. Yeah, it's down here. You've been told the rules, Mr. Dennis. Please, your time will start when you start.
Thank you, Chair. I need to make the point that allowing just 3 minutes to put forward objections in a case like this is a bit of... Is it not working? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I need to make the point, first of all, that allowing just 3 minutes to put forward objections in a case like this is a bit of an insult to public participation. If I was complaining about a neighbour who wanted to install a window, I'd get 3 minutes. If I need to address thousands of pages of technical information dealing with difficult areas of fact and law, I get 3 minutes. The public is meant to be fully involved in this process, not just tolerated for the least time possible. The policy relied upon was never meant to cover a situation where your committee was considering that amount of documentation dealing with an environmental impact assessment of high public interest. In the circumstances, all I can do is briefly list some of the matters that the public has raised and see how we progress from there. So in no particular order, you cannot be satisfied that you have the proper level of expert advice to help analyse the ES and the responses from the public. There has been no analysis of the objections received from the public and others, although there is no rejection of what is said by the public. The inspector's agreement with the content of the ES is not as claimed by your officer. You should not use Section 73 in this way. Salami slicing is used again in order to help disguise the true extent of this application. Recent Welsh legislation encourages the use of the WHO limits for emissions. No harm to public health is ignored, although there's no reason for this. Wasting heat is unacceptable. This application is in breach of the Welsh Government moratorium against new incineration in Wales. When considering whether planning permission should be granted, it would be wrong of a local authority to take into account any worry that it might be appealed. That's not a planning consideration. Noise is not dealt with adequately, as noise from the conveyor is deliberately omitted by the applicant. The emissions from burning the fuel are a minimum of 130,000 tonnes of CO2 per annum. But taking all into account, this will be upwards of 160,000 tonnes per annum, with no prospect of a reduction in emissions over its lifetime. That means over 4 million tonnes of greenhouse gases over its first 25 years. Wood is more polluting for the atmosphere than coal, especially for an incinerator of this size. Welsh Water said it had capacity for domestic waste from the incinerator, but has been made to accept over 4,000 litres per hour of industrial waste. The flood risk TAN 15 says no incinerator in this flood zone. Drainage to collect the rain and fire water is inadequate. The ES does not contain any data or analysis in relation to dust. There is no current waste planning assessment. The ES is inadequate as it doesn't include anything about 31 and it self-scopes out matters. The stack is too short.
Well done, you managed that within the 3 minutes.
Thank you. We aim to please.
You just stay there in case there are any points of clarification from any members of the committee. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. You could probably ask for a clarification on each of the many points that you've raised there. Some of them, I hope, will be discussed by our officers, particularly regarding omissions. That's omissions, as in things which have not been discussed in the papers, rather than emissions, although the emissions are very important. I was just wondering if one of the things you mentioned was you talked about salami slicing to disguise the type of application. I'm just wondering what you meant by that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. This project has suffered from salami slicing for, throughout, I think. It is a method of applying for planning permission for one thing, but always with the intention of applying for other aspects later on, but realising to get it through in the first case, you need to be a little bit careful with how much you put forward. In this case, the salami slicing is to take out the small amount just to the north of the original site and the larger amount to the north of that. I think the officer may have misled us on that, not intentionally, because he referred to a plan that had the original site on it and then a bit in blue or outlined in blue above it. I understand that application 33 is only a small part of that. Is that right?
Unfortunately, you're not.
Okay, that's okay. I won't ask him any
questions in that way.
questions. He can come in later.
Are there any other points of clarification that we?
So can I just say why that's important? Sorry about that. When it comes to looking at certain other aspects, such as the rainwater that falls on this land, there is an attenuation tank that collects it so that it doesn't go off the land. The attenuation tank is calculated on the basis of the original site and doesn't take proper account of the small bit for application 33 or the larger bit that was developed alongside everything else above that. So that is going to be an issue, and they try to avoid it by salami slicing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Any other points of clarification? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, only one. You say the stack's too short. How far?
Yeah, the stack. Oh, there we go. The stack we have is about 43 metres high. Aviva has another incinerator, which is situated, they say, about 3/4 of a kilometre from its nearest housing, and that stack is 80 metres high. Our stack of 43 metres reaches about halfway up the height of Barry. Barry rises up to about 90, just over 90 metres to the north of this stack. If it was an 80-metre stack, then there's a better chance that when the wind's coming from a southerly direction, the plume is not going to land on part of our town. They've developed a stack of 43 metres for some reason. and relied on calculations that themselves make no real sense, because the original calculations to say 43 meters was fine relied on a different diameter of the stack, which meant that the plume coming out was coming out really fast, so it would rise up a lot. Unfortunately, the diameter was significantly increased so that the plume comes out much slower, and yet, as if by magic, the same height stack is supposed to be the optimum level of stack. But comparing it with what Aviva has elsewhere,
Thank you,
it
Mr.
doesn't
Clark.
work.
Are there any other points of clarification? I see no hands. Ian, would you like to respond to?
Thanks, Chair. Right, let's take these points in order. I mean, in respect to salami slicing, I think it's a matter of judgment. It's not my perspective on that is not the same as Mr. Clark's. I mean, the development that was approved in 2015 was approved and you know washed its face in terms of the site area. I think the fact that additional land to the north, and Mr. Clark's correct, the land that was on that plan, not all of it was the land subject of AP 33. It was the bit closest to the main site. The fact that developers subsequently used that land for sort of servicing and some functional things doesn't, in my view, mean it's salami slicing, and I think to refer to salami slicing, you have to be sort of talking to the intentions of the developer at the time, and I'm not sure we can do that. We're just judging the application on its merits in front of us. The moratorium. The officer did contact Welsh Government about the moratorium, and they advised him that, and this is touched on in the report, that it didn't apply to a development of this, doesn't apply to development of this kind. I think the key thing there is, imagine, is if when the moratorium was put in place, it didn't apply to a development of this kind, then it doesn't apply to this development. This is very much the same in nature as the development from 2015. If the moratorium had have taken into account in its sorry, when I say applied, I mean talking about in the evidence that led to it. So the moratorium was based on Welsh Government saying, well, there's no need for further developments of a certain kind to produce energy. If the Barry development had have been taken into account in 2015, that would still form part of the evidence base now. But we're advised that it doesn't apply to this specific type of development, notwithstanding that, again, that doesn't come back to the scope of the application to look at the changes from the 2015 consent, and that this isn't a fundamentally different application, which would mean there's a different kind of reference to the moratorium. In terms of noise, there are what we consider to be robust noise conditions on the recommendation, including measures to deal with any issues that arise regarding breaches of certain noise levels, regarding those having to be mitigated against. In terms of TAN 15, NLW have not objected. Again, it's set out in the report, but there's kind of a judgment we've taken, bearing in mind NLW's position on it, the kind of scope of site that's within the flood risk area, what part of the development that relates to, and again, coming back to the question of if this permission were refused, this development were refused on those grounds, looking at the fallback position of the implemented 2015 consent, would that then result in material difference in respect of flood risk? And that, I think, was set out in the report that we feel there wouldn't be. In terms of the stack, I'm not highly technical on those points. I wouldn't profess to be, and that's why we rely on the submission of kind of evidence to justify a development, and we rely on consultees that we consult. I appreciate it's Mr. Clark's view that the stack should be higher, but the kind of relevant consultees we've gone to in respect of Public Health Wales, Environmental Health, Natural Resources Wales, who've looked at these impacts, looked at the emissions, have said they don't object. I can't second guess that. So yes, I appreciate Mr. Clark doesn't agree with that, and that there might be an instance where there's a higher stack in a different town with a different context. That doesn't automatically mean that it's required here. The evidence that the consultees have reviewed has indicated that it's an acceptable height. So as officers, we feel we have to accept that.
Thank you, Ian. Right, are there any members not of the committee, elected members, who wish to speak on this? Ewan.
Thank you, Chair. If I may begin with the fact that officers are correct that changes to the application to the one in 2015 is what is being considered today. However, they do not include although they do not include the fact that changes to legislation and to policy since 2015 must also be considered. So let me give you some reasons that why you can refuse this application. So the Welsh Government's new policy is that all power must be decarbonised by 2035. All power consumption must be decarbonised. Meanwhile, this application, according to Natural Resources Wales, would produce 130,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide every single year. That, for a bit of context, is double that of the entire Vale of Glamorgan Council produces every year. Under the current projections of the UK's Climate Change Committee, this application would produce 4 times the amount of CO2 per unit of power than the entire national grid of Wales on average, and that would increase to 20 times per unit of energy by 2030 if we are to hit our carbon commitments. We don't know how long this plant is going to run for. We cannot assume how long this plant is going to run for. Additionally, we have the carbon capture and storage considerations. So the Welsh Government current policy, from the Welsh Government statement from the Climate Change Minister taking action to make the circular economy a reality, every application which is waste to heat applications must be taken to have some kind of ready or enabled carbon capture or carbon storage. This application has none. The environmental statement says we must assume it will have none for the entirety of this development's life. And Imperial College London has some research into this and says that the carbon capture storage is simply not viable commercially whatsoever for the life of a development of a plant such as this, and would not mitigate the carbon emissions included. Finally, I want to touch on the waste of heat. So policy 19 of the Welsh carbon budget, the Welsh Government policy, Welsh Government's carbon budget 2, says that all energy from waste plants must supply heat to the local residents. This is part of improving the energy efficiency of our towns and cities. This environmental statement says that heat offtake cannot be given to local buildings, cannot be provided to the local grid, and we must assume that it will not be possible to do at any point in this plant's operation. In fact, even though the environmental statement and some of the statements from Aviva has said that it plans to do so eventually, there is simply not the supply chain for it at the moment. Well, simply all it's saying is there's not the demand. If there's not the demand now, there never will be with the cost of living crisis. Finally, the Future Wales National Plan says that Barry is a priority district for heat. This is an area that needs that heat generation more than anywhere. However, 75% of the heat that is going to be produced by this plant is going to waste entirely. This is in contradiction to Welsh legislation. This is in contradiction to Welsh Government policy. This is in contradiction of everything that we're trying to achieve under Project Zero. And for these reasons, I think the committee must deny this application.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan Goodjohn. Councillor Emma Goodjohn, you wanted to speak? 5 minutes again.
Thank you, Chair. I have some points which I'd like to bring to the committee's attention for consideration. Firstly, I noted the public responses are not fully represented in the report, but summarised by keywords, which takes away the overall feeling of the community. I haven't met anybody who is for this biomass plant. Noise and vibration is another one of my points. Acoustic compliance testing has not been conducted on the external conveyor whilst carrying biomass material. Compliance that the noise will not exceed 4 dB above the prevailing background level as a planning condition has not been reliably tested or proven. Mitigation measures are not yet in place that are specified as replacement parts and additional acoustic enclosures. They do not appear to be preventive enough as industrial soundproofing measures on this scale. Additional enclosures may also require further planning consent. Relying on the operator to provide the local planning authority with the results of an acoustic investigation and details of any further schemes of noise mitigation also appears a very vague future strategy of protecting our community and our environment, when this company is not trusted or reliable, having broken previous planning agreements. Relying on residents to monitor the plant by making noise complaints to the local authority before further enforcement action can be taken is not protecting our community's future. As an authority, we need to be effectively leading in ensuring these planning conditions are met. The final preventative measure being the to stop part of the plant which is creating the noise from operating is not robust. Noise levels should be thoroughly and practically tested before granting planning permission. These measures of controlling the noise issue are risky, with housing and over 55 facilities closely in the vicinity of the plant. Allowing this application will significantly and detrimentally affect the well-being of families and vulnerable Barry residents. It is obvious the Barry Mass plant cannot meet this planning condition and so must be rejected. My final point is to do with flooding. The plant is built within areas of the highest risk of tidal flooding. Whilst government policy states vulnerable developments such as infrastructure for electricity supply, including generation, should not be cited in these areas. The fact that it is already built does not change the practical reasons why this policy is in place. All assessments subsequent to the first 2008 RSK report are broadly the same and are significantly higher than 7.85 metres. The lowest part of the plant is 7.60 metres. The plant is at risk of flooding. Natural Resources Wales flood map for planning also identifies the site to be of up to 0.25 metres in the turbine hall. This analysis fails to acknowledge the critical infrastructure lower down within the site, such as the Great Gatehouse, pump house and transformers will be flooded much deeper than that. It does, however, acknowledge the potential flood depths of up to 1.36 metres close to the site entrance, which is very significant and not within tolerable limits. This vulnerable development is located next to a body of water with the second highest tidal range in the world. It has no specific flood emergency plan provided and no assessment for the rate, speed and velocity of the floodwater. We are in a climate emergency and a global warming is significant. I propose that this is not acceptable on account of the alterations and the additional structures on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Are there any points of clarification for either Councillor Ewan or Councillor Emma Goodjohn? Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. Is this a point of clarification?
Yes. Oh, am I still here? Yeah, I'm still there. Good. Yeah, slight point of clarification due to a little technical hitch I had. I lost about 7 seconds. Would you mind repeating a little bit about the amount of emissions from the chimney and the Welsh Government? Because just in case I missed that little bit, if there's an important point you want to repeat to me, because I did miss between 5 and 7 seconds as I got thrown out and had to re-enter.
Yes, so the Ewan Goodjohn's.
Ewan Goodjohn, yeah.
Could you please, Ewan?
Of course, Councillor Perry. The Welsh Government has part of its policy that all power consumption in Wales must be decarbonised by 2035. This plant, according to Natural Resources Wales, I have the letter with me, says that it would produce 130,000 tonnes of CO2 every single year, and that would be double that of the Vale of Glamorgan Council as a whole as of 22-23.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other points of clarification? I see no hands. In that case, Ian, would you like to address any of the points raised?
Not significantly. I mean, a number of them are technical and they're dealt with in the report or things I've said earlier. I think there's a number of points raised which, again, I think there's a kind of a difference in view as to really the sort of scope of the application and what we kind of are entitled to assess with a Section 73 application. So obviously the view of officers has been that, you know, we are bearing in mind an implemented consent and that the application is to vary the plan's condition, and we're looking at the changes. So looking at whether what's proposed now versus what was proposed before makes that fundamental difference, that you start to revisit the principle of the development. That's kind of the kind of general principle that it's been assessed on, but that's all I'd really say.
Thank you, Ian. We're moving to the debate now then. Councillor Payne, you have your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. My point is about the structures and alterations on page 81. One of those is about, well, there's a urea silo. I wanted to know what is going to be stored in there. That's the first thing. The second thing is the emergency diesel generator. And I'm assuming it's not going to be a caravan generator. So I wanted to know the size of the diesel generator. And for me, again, with the carbon neutral and the Project Zero, is around diesel engines produce more pollutants than other types of generators, including nitrogen oxides, particulate matter and carbon monoxide. And the other concern about diesel generators is their consumption. So these are points that I'd like clarified, and I'm not sure if this is in the EIA unless I've missed it, because there's lots of technical data in there. But I am concerned about the diesel generator and the carbon emissions, and also what is stored in the urea silo, because on my little bit of research was around containment of explosions as well. So I just wanted that clarified, please.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I'll ask I'll ask Mr. Robinson to answer a number of points at the end. Nick, Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. As someone who was actually on this committee in 2015 when the original consent was given, I can only be amazed at the differences between that plan as agreed and the plan that we're now asking to amend. The site and everything within it is considerably different to what was agreed back then. This scheme is not green, it is not environmental, and in the 9 years since that plan was given consent, there have been major changes in the area. And by that, whilst we may have concerns about the shortness of the stack and the difference in the size of the stack and how that would affect people in Dockview Road and area, we now have a whole housing estate and other buildings built up around it, which I find incredible. There's been a catalogue of errors by this council, all started from day one by Welsh Government. I remember in 2015 that I was prevented, along with other members, from debating basic attributes of this scheme, such as pollution and noise, all the things that you think would be of a concern to a power factory, an incinerator of this type. We must also remember that the energy production compared with the gross need is absolutely minimal and is a pure money-making enterprise at our expense. And when I say our expense, I mean the residents of Barry and the Vale. This has to stop, and it has to stop now. There have been other instances in other incinerator areas in England by this very same firm that have resulted in very, very, very different schemes going forward. The whole principle of wood pellets has gone. They have moved to black bag burning. who knows what may happen down the road here. And I failed to be reassured by NRW and the whole permit because they seem to change with the wind. They allow schemes that are not representative of the views of this council and its policies, or even of Welsh Government and its policies. And if we're serious about the environment, serious about net zero, serious about wildlife and even human health, then we must reject this now. And I'm amazed that these people have got the gall to come to us with this application in this style after they built it wrong and the wrong way round. So I urge rejection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I fully support rejection of this application. When we look at applications generically about such things, we're always very concerned when we have retrospective applications. When something is built in one way and members support it, and all of a sudden it has to come back to us to do it in another way, then we need to really thoroughly reconsider it. And we've had excellent speakers so far about the viability of this. And as many of you have rightly said, the world has moved on and we need to move on. And the fact is, we got Project Zero, we declared as a council a climate emergency. This is all consistent with rejecting this application. And I call all members to do that. But I will reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
What? Thank you. Are there any other members of the committee wanting to speak on this? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give people a moment to put their headphones on. As Mr. Clark explained earlier, and a number of speakers since then, and the officers said, this is a complicated matter. There's a long history to the application, and to this particular application, and to the variation of the application. I want to talk a little bit about the process, but just to give you an example, this week I went on a walk around my ward with an officer from the housing department, and they pointed to flats that the council built years ago which had asbestos. We also hear about the reinforced concrete. The clock is turning, things are changing. This application was accepted in 2015 without an environmental declaration. In 2016, the Welsh Government changed legislation to create developments of national significance. In 2021, the Welsh Government put in place a moratorium on waste energy developments, which isn't quite the same thing as I understand from the officers earlier, but it's nonetheless close. They put in the document, we're going to place a moratorium on any developments for large waste, because no large infrastructure of this type will be needed. So I don't understand whether there's any purpose to this development to go forward if it's already not working. We've heard, and of course Welsh Government has changed its mind a number of times on such developments. telling us before that we didn't need to consider environmental impact, and then they decided actually there was. And since around an hour, a minister has just said about the responsibility for in the environment. So it's worth asking who Ranka Davis exactly what this should go forward if it isn't going forward in other places around Wales. During the presentation earlier, we've heard that there's a difference of opinion between officers and a number of other people. There are some points which have been made which are very important, which is the fact that this paper isn't going through objections and comments from the public. This is important in terms of transparency. If we go through a consultation, people should be expected to be heard in a proper fashion. We've heard about concerns with regards to flooding. We've heard about concerns with regards to emissions. We've heard concerns about the impact of being so close to houses which have been recently built. Before that, we heard about the plume plotter and where the ash would reach. It is not Dockley Road, it gets to Buttrell's Road and the hill there, which is closer to the north of the town. So this isn't just a South Barry matter. It reaches to the middle and above. We've also heard about noise. The problem is the evidence that we've now received doesn't give me confidence as a local councillor on this committee to agree or to commend this application, considering this in the context of it having been passed, but having been passed in 2015, and since then the literal climate has changed. I don't know if anyone's moved this yet, but I would like to agree with Councillor Winson and to propose that we reject the application before us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. The mood seems to be, unless there are any other speakers, so Councillor Drake, you have your hand up to speak.
Yes, as the ward member for this ward in Catalan, as Councillor Hodges said, this has been going on for so long, and I believe I've always made my views known. And there's no point in repeating what other people have said this evening. My views remain the same. I have and always will be against this build. To me, it's a very untrustworthy build. I cannot say any more than that, but I would urge everybody else to reject it.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. The mood seems to be for rejecting the officer's recommendations. I anticipated this and have had discussion with legal and so forth before the meeting, and the suggestion is that we move to a private session for to discuss the reasons for our rejection, to put forward concrete reasons, material reasons to reject, in which case I would ask non-members of the committee to leave, please. With that, yeah.
It's sabotage. That's what it is.
Okay, thank you all. We're now back live. I apologise to all those that we had to exclude from our discussion for a short period. We now move on. So we have a proposal to reject officers' recommendations. We've debated amongst ourselves the grounds upon which we wish to reject those recommendations, which can be summed up as, can you read them out?
I haven't got the full version.
I haven't got the full version. Could, Mark, Ian, could you read out what the conclusions we came to, please?
Yes, Chair. The conclusion is related to the following reasons. The first one being that the unauthorised addition of the ancillary structures, minor alterations and associated layout changes, including a lean-to fuel reception building, lean-to compressor house, urea silo, discharge incline conveyor, screening tower and dust extraction, emergency diesel generator and tank fire kiosk, fire water tank and pump house, an amendment to stack width and an enlargement to noise attenuator located at the base of the chimney have detrimentally affected the appearance of the building over and above that approved in 2015 and will harm the amenity of nearby residential properties in both the waterfront and Dockview Road. The development is accordingly contrary to policies MD2 brackets be of a high standard of design that positively contributes to the context and character of the surrounding natural and built environment, and MD5 does not unacceptably impact upon the character and appearance of the locality of the adopted Vale of Glamorgan local plan. And the second one was that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that there would not be adverse environmental impacts because the EIA fails to fully assess the impacts regarding waste, particularly as there is no specific chapter dealing with this key issue, and it is therefore contrary to policies MD2 and MD20 of the adopted Vale of Glamorgan local development plan. Okay,
So I propose that we move to a vote based on those suggestions. If we are, it needs to be moved and seconded. Okay.
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, I've moved, you seconded. In that case, I think the vote will be, if you are for, sorry, Councillor Johnson.
Just confirming, Chair, that we're having a recorded vote on this.
Yeah, okay. Recorded vote, if you are voting for refusal, you are voting positive, you are voting yes. If you're at home, if you're voting against refusal, you're voting negative, or you can, of course, abstain. I think everyone has voted, so we can close the vote and display it. There are 13 for and 2 abstentions. Councillor Cave, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it was a recorded vote, and therefore I'd like to reiterate what I said in the closed session, that I had to abstain because I had technical problems during the meeting, and that made it difficult for me to hear everything that was going on and said, and I lost large sections, so I had no other choice but to abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Cave. Moving on, we come to 2023-00033 for land to the north of Barry Biomass Renewable Energy Facility. Ian, I think again you are presenting this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So this application, I referred to it earlier. Liam, are you okay to just share the slide which will show the correct site area as Mr. Clark referred to earlier? So it's that red bit of land there. So the application proposes to regularise what is an ongoing use of that land for storage and vehicle turning and kind of ancillary functional activities to the main site. this is also subject to matters arising, as I mentioned earlier, for the first. It's also subject to a similar holding direction, which would restrict approval but not restrict refusal. And that is not a huge amount to say, really. It wasn't part of the original application, as discussed earlier. It's something that has been used by the developer as an area to kind of increase the size. Notwithstanding the refusal of the last application, it is a separate proposal in its own right. So hence our separate consideration of it.
Thank you, Ian. We have a public speaker again on this. Mr. Clark.
3 minutes ago. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
3 minutes again.
It may be there's really no point in saying much about this because it's obviously ancillary to the main application that's just been rejected. And I would invite you to say that it shouldn't stand on its own. It's just, it's got no use really as a storage and vehicle turning area. Plus, I repeat my point earlier that there is insufficient or probably no ability to catch rainwater that's going to come off it. It's going to flow into the dock and or Woodham Road. Because if the main site isn't in operation, there's nothing to collect the water. So perhaps it's a minor point. The main point being, standing on its own, it's a nonsense.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification from any members of the committee? I see no hands. Do any members of the committee want to make any comments and to discuss this? Councillor Wilson.
Question of the officers, really. Bearing in mind what we have done in our previous application in relation to this, obviously this is, as you rightly said, as Danny's rightly said here, this is ancillary. I can't see how it could stand on its own if we rejected the previous one. I move that we move rejection of this as well.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, so what I consider members may wish to consider is, so noting the two reasons for refusal just now, I don't see any reason why, particularly, as members and Mr. Clark have said, given that it's only there to serve as part of this, that the reasons could, for members to consider, be phrased along the lines of that the proposal, which is an integral and operational part, I'll start again. The proposal is an integral and operational part of a development which, and then essentially repeat the other two. So it's an integral and operational part of a development which is harmful to amenity, and it's integral and operational part of a development which has not been demonstrated to not have adverse environmental impacts. So essentially we're using very similar reasons, but making a note of how that this is part and parcel of the running of that unacceptable development.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks for your advice. Helen, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Are there any speakers?
If anyone doesn't want to speak, I'd move to a vote, Chair.
Yeah, I was about to ask whether anybody did want to speak, and if not, then we'll move straight to a vote. Nobody else wants to speak, so we are voting again, similarly to reject the application, to not approve the application, on the grounds that Ian Robinson's just delineated for us. Are you happy with that? Right, we move to the vote. The vote is up.
I just want to move, if you're going to say for plus or minus, which way?
We're moving to reject. So yes is reject.
Okay, yes is reject. Yeah. Just clarify that. Thank you.
Right, we have 15 votes in. It's unanimous to reject. On the grounds that Ian Robinson delineated for us. Moving on. Thank you all. Moving on then to 2023-00895/full. Steve Butler, I think you're the main man on this, please.
Indeed. Thank you, Chairman. If we could just have the slides, Liam. So the application site comprises of an agricultural field, a barn, and an existing farm access on the southeastern edge of Pencline. Part of the site access and the barn are within the settlement boundary of Pencline, but the rest of the site falls within the countryside. The site is within a special landscape area, and the area outside the settlement boundary is within a safeguarded area for limestone. Part of the site is grade 3A agricultural land, which is good to moderate quality land. If you look at members, look at the, sorry, yeah, that's fine. There's a dotted line there's a sort of green dotted line that runs out from the red oval. That's a line of a public right of way. So there's a public right of way that passes through the site. There's also a bank of trees on the aerial photograph. You can see a kind of bank of trees. They are actually protected trees. So if we just go to the site layout, please, Liam. So that's the site edge red. Again, you've got there's the old sort of farmstead, which is part of the land owned by the applicant, and then there's a number of houses then on that kind of corner junction. So the application itself is for a change of use from agricultural use to a glamping tourist site. So the scheme comprises of 3 yurts. We could just go to there's a couple of plans, I think, towards the end showing the site layout. Okay, there we are. So you can see in front of you kind of 3 groups of yurts. So you've got the main yurt, which is the bedroom accommodation, and then you've got a smaller separate yurt which provides the kitchen and dining facilities. The scheme includes the conversion of the existing barn, which is located it's been highlighted. That's going to be converted into a shower block, amenity block, and also part of it will be used as storage facility as well. So the supporting statement states that the yurts will be used between March and April all through to October, and outside of that time the yurts will be removed. The main sleeping yurts will be approximately 5 metres in width and approximately 2.8 metres in height, whilst the kitchen yurts will be smaller and will be approximately 3.6 metres wide and approximately 2.5 metres in height. The yurts themselves will be finished in sort of natural materials comprising of a mix of felt, skins, etc. If we just go back to the site layout plan, parking is proposed running parallel. If you can just see it sort of on the left image, there's a sort of row of parking areas. So 4 parking spaces are proposed. And if we can go just down to the photos, Liam. So the images on the top right shows the existing access. The existing access will be utilised, and that little grass verge area that separates the site from the wider field with a post and rail fence. That's where the parking area will be. So the building on the left hand side, as you see, is the existing stable building. That's going to be effectively, that's the one that's actually in the settlement boundary. So that's going to be effectively rebuilt, pretty much, like for like in terms of the built form. So it'll have the same sort of pitch roof, but with a metal roof, and it'll be timber clad. A number of roof lights will also be proposed on the front elevation. So just in terms of a bit of context, the 2 photos on the right hand side are the approach southwards, the Pencline. So you've got very characterised by relatively low level stone walls. So the site itself will sit in that corner, top end corner of the field, very much viewed against the quite high tree line. For some context, the photo on the bottom left corner is taken from outside of the site, but that's the actual access to Pencline Castle, where you've got the estate rail running down the side. So from our point of view, we consider it as a low impact tourist accommodation. As I say, it's very temporary in terms of its impact, on the basis that those yurts will be removed outside of that specified season. again, say that the rebuilding of the stable building itself, that element is within the settlement boundary. Everything else is very low impact. Say that the parking area will be in gravel. Even the pathways to the yurts will be just mown grass. The scheme also proposes quite an extensive scheme of landscaping to provide a kind of sense of enclosure around the site. And also there's a proposal to provide a stock-proof fence from the site to the remainder of the agricultural land. As part of that, the scheme will safeguard the existing public right-of-way, which runs through the site. There are a number of conditions on it. I don't think I probably need to say too much more about that. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. So the recommendation is for approval subject to all the conditions that are in the papers. We have no public speaker on this, so we'll move straight to the debate. If there is any, would any members, Councillor Champion, you called this in, so perhaps you should go first.
Yes, Chair. Do you want to stop sharing the screen? Shall I carry on?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, they're trying to stop sharing the screen, but
okay. I called this in, Chair, because I had a large number of people contacting me with sort of complaints about this development, and so I called it in so they would have an opportunity to address the meeting, but I believe they didn't come forward in time, so they haven't. But I presume in the documents their concerns have been raised. So that's the reason really I called it in, not because I felt it was a big issue myself, but I'm supporting my people on my ward.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Champion. Certainly there are detailed representations within the report detailing the concerns of neighbours, although I'm not sure that any of them did apply at all to speak. Councillor Hodges.
Move officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Second that.
We have a number of seconds. Helen?
Yeah, can I just say, I think it's really nice. It's good for tourism in the Vale of Glamorgan, and I think they're fantastic. Having stayed in a few yurt lots of times myself, when my son was small, they're fantastic, and they give a great outdoor experience.
Thank you for that. Did you want to speak? Councillor Champion, is that a legacy hand or are you asking to speak again? I take it it's gone down, it's a legacy hand. Officer's recommendations have been moved and seconded. Do we need to go to a vote? Is anybody opposed? Councillor Champion, I'm assuming that's saying no, in which case we'll move to a vote.
I'm just going to abstain.
You're welcome to do that.
Yes.
The vote is
I'll
up.
do that in the vote. Okay.
Have you voted, Helen?
I think Councillor Johnson's gone, so that's one less.
So you're
I think that's everybody because Councillor Johnson has left. It's 13-4 with one abstention, so that's carried. Thank you all for your forbearance and your determination to stick it out. It's been a longish meeting, and but I think we've achieved a great deal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chair.